So which race is best for which class in Baldur's Gate 3? Well, spoiler alert, the answer is there isn't really one. There are some classes and races that work more optimally together, but the game is designed where everything will work in tandem with one another. So in this video we are going to go over sort of the classes that I think are more optimal, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're the best. The best will really be whichever one you want to play as. But let's go into it. We're going to do this in alphabetical order, starting with the Barbarian, as you can see on screen. For the Barbarian, the obvious first choice is Half Orc. Get a skill proficiency to Intimidation. This is great for Barbarians because they are very intimidating. You get Dark Vision, which can be very helpful, especially if you end up in a situation where you're blinded. Relentless Endurance. If you reach 0 hit points, you regain 1 hit point instead of becoming downed. Now, despite the fact that Barbarians are tanky and can just take and absorb damage, having the ability to bounce back from death once per long rest is phenomenal. As well as Savage Attacks. When you land a critical hit with a melee weapon attack, you do an additional extra dice of weapon damage. This very much just allows you to throw extra damage onto your Barbarians. Dragonborn is another race that comes to mind when I think of Barbarian. Obviously not just for the semantics, but for the acid breath. So, depending on which subclass you take, you end up with a breath attack, which can be a very good option if you'd like to just do a cone of damage to a group of enemies without hitting with your weapon. Again, if you're using a Barbarian, chances are higher levels you are going to have more attacks and relentless attacks, things like this. But this is just an extra added option, especially if you can do stuff like poison and add a little bit of extra damage onto the target per turn. The other option that comes to mind when I think of a Barbarian is Dwarf. Now, they obviously have a bunch of proficiencies which are very helpful, Dark Vision as well. And when you enter your subclasses, Gold Dwarf stands out for me for Dwarven Toughness. Your hit point maximum increases by 1 and increases by 1 again every time you gain a level, which basically means you'll have an extra 12 hit points by the end of the game, which doesn't really sound like a lot, but that can be the difference between 1 or 2 hits. Especially when you consider you take half damage if you are raging. That is an extra hit that you can just absorb and tank. Totally worth it. You could also go with Shield Dwarf. A bunch of extra proficiencies here as well. And the Duragar is not a bad option either, just for this superior Dark Vision. This can really help you out in a pickle, as well as things such as advantage on saving throws against illusions, being charmed or paralyzed. Those would be my 3 options if you're going to be a Barbarian. For the Bard, my first option would be the Tiefling. More importantly, it would be the Misophiles Tiefling, just because they have such a amazing advantage to magic. Not advantage per se in terms of the game mechanics, but they have more amazing offensive and defensive abilities when it comes to magic, in my opinion. My other option would be an Elf. Now, it might seem a little weird to some. However, if you were going to... This is more akin to if you were doing the College of Swords subclass, because unfortunately that doesn't give you access to longswords or longbows. And the Elf will fix that for you. You also have elven weapon training, so you have proficiency with longswords, short bows, and longbows. This is very, very amazing. You also get a skill proficiency in Perception. Again, very, very good. As well as Dark Vision, which I think is sometimes key in this game because there are a lot of enemies that will cast darkness, or a lot of dark areas it will put you in. So if you really want to go with the more damage-dealing College of Swords subclass, Elf might be your best bet. And a little bit of a wild card here, but Githyanki. Now, there's not really much here that makes them amazing. Obviously, you do have the longsword and stuff like that. However, the key thing is Astral Knowledge. Gain proficiency in all skills of a chosen ability. This way you can really keep your charisma at a high level. This allows you to be much more front and damage dealing, but still have the ability to have your charisma be buffed and really benefit from that. Next up is the Cleric, one of my favourite classes in Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, for Cleric, I'm going to start with a bit of a interesting choice again, a Drow. Now, the reason for this is what my Dark Urge is currently on the channel. I'm doing a Drow Cleric. Reason for this is the fact that Drows have this... They have more resistances to magic as the game progresses, which I think makes them a bit more able to absorb damage as the game goes on. Other options here would be, once again, a Gold Dwarf, just for the tanking options. I think having a cleric that can not only support but also absorb a lot of damage is very, very helpful, and those extra 12 hit points on top of how well the cleric works already is phenomenal. And of course, anyone that you ask will obviously always tell you that a elf, and more importantly, a wood elf, are some of the best clerics in all of Dungeons and Dragons. This because wood elves are very, very good spellcasters across the board, and they have such good movement speed. There you go. Your movement speed is increased by 1.5 meters, and they have a proficiency in stealth. And depending on what you've sort of got your cleric kitted out in, proficiency in stealth could really be very helpful if you are trying to sneak around the battlefield. Okay, the druid is much like the cleric in a way. They both rely on wisdom for their spells. And once again, this is where the gold dwarf comes in handy. Now, the gold dwarf works really well if you're going with the Circle of the Moon subclass. This because this is more of a tanking-esque druid as opposed to the Circle of Spores and whatnot, which is more magic. Circle of Druid, because of how when they wild shape into the beasts, they don't really benefit from anything other than traits and abilities. The wild shape forms will benefit from the dwarfs, from the gold dwarfs, extra health using the dwarven toughness. This is what makes the dwarf very good if you're going to beast form. However, if you're going more of a magic-based user, this is where something such as, once again, the elf comes into play, just because of how good their wisdom abilities naturally are. Elves are more beneficial here because they, once again, expand on what the druid can use for weapons due to all the proficiencies you will have, and you also get the benefit of having a extra cantrip. Now, this is the best benefit when going with a wood elf, again, as always, or a high elf. It doesn't really matter, you can go with one or the other, but you do get a firebolt cantrip here with the high elf, and this is a very good cantrip to just have as extra, which you won't benefit from if you take a wood elf, as you can see from the cantrips on the left-hand side, or the right-hand side, I should say. Okay, the fighter, in my opinion, this is one of the most basic classes to players. This is a very beginner-friendly class. You can't really go wrong with a fighter. For the fighter, I don't really think there are many options that you shouldn't take, to be honest. Githyanki, I think, is a great option for a fighter, just for the reasons of you can move around the battlefield more. You have things such as Second Wind. Anyone that's played as Lae'zel in this game will tell you how good a Githyanki is. But you can have Second Wind, so you can gain the health back. You'll have Misty Step, allowing you to dance around the battlefield. I think that's amazing for a fighter. You'll also have things as the Githyanki can jump further. Again, very, very good for jumping around the battlefield. This is also where the Half-Orc comes back in. Things such as the Intimidation bonus is great. Savage Attacks is great, meaning that's a critical hit. With your melee weapon attack, you do an additional die of damage. Considering how many attacks the fighter gets if you stick with a pure fighter build, this is amazing. Coupled with a action surge, and you're just having more and more attacks and more chance of landing that critical hit. And much like the Barbarian, going down to 0 hit points, you get to bounce back to 1 hit point, is perfect. Especially if you get your cleric to come around and heal up. Phenomenal. And Dark Vision as well will benefit you so much. Another option here, of course, would be the Shield Dwarf. We mentioned this earlier, but this is amazing just for all the proficiencies you can get, and you can really just round out a big, beefy dwarf with this. The Monk is a really fun class, and this is essentially just the martial artist of Baldur's Gate or D&D, and it's kind of akin to a fighter in a way. You get to throw around a bunch of melee attacks. I mean, the Fire Osprey can do range, and so can a Monk, but the Monk will just dish out damage if you want, just non-stop. Now for this, again, Githyanki I think are phenomenal, for the same reasons that they are so good for a fighter, is you can dance around the battlefield much better with a Githyanki than you can with most other classes at base level. Things such as the extra jump, things such as the Misty Step that comes to them naturally, is just insanely good. Now if you're going for the 4 elements, this is where you can do a little bit tricky. The Drow, because of how good their magic is naturally, is a very good option here, as well as things such as the superior Dark Vision and the Drow weapon training. Another option here would be your Dragonborn, for the sole reason of the breath weapon, because the way the Four Elements subclass is more on elemental damage as opposed to pure fist damage, Dragonborn is phenomenal if you can attune it to whether your elements are buffed at. Your breath weapon will therefore be just extra damage and extra buffed and fit in with your playstyle that you're going with. If you're sticking with a normal Where the Open Hand-esque race, or subclass I should say, bit of a unique option here, but the Halfling, and more importantly, the Lightfoot Halfling, is phenomenal. Now, naturally stealthy, you have advantage on stealth checks. This is really good for a monk because Dex will be a key stat here. But a Lightfoot Halfling also allows you to reroll any ones on a damage dice. And considering a monk's damage dice is four-sided, more chance of rolling a 1, and therefore more chance of rolling higher damage per hit. This is what makes a Lightfoot Halfling phenomenal. Okay, the Holy Warrior, the Paladin now. You can't really go wrong with Paladin. They're very good at just all-round doing what they do. You could go with a Half-Orc. Now, these aren't the best at magic, I won't lie to you. But if you're willing to sort of dump points into your charisma and whatnot, you can really, in the long run, make a Half-Orc Paladin a very good magic as well as offensive user, because the offensive abilities you get here are phenomenal, like Savage Attack and Relentless Endurance can, much like with the Barbarian and Fire, can really be of a benefit to a Paladin. But for me, the only thing that really lets down a Paladin is a Dark Vision. So any race that offers Dark Vision, such as a Half-Orc, will really benefit you, because there are some enemies that will focus on using darkness to their advantage. I'm thinking of Shadowheart's side quest mainly. That was a tough one. Akin to that, once again, we're back at the Gold Dwarf just because of how they are so tough, and the extra health is such a benefit. These guys, you can just really tank them out, and they can just sit in the middle of the battlefield and just absorb damage, deal damage out, and really allow your other support characters or your other DPS characters to stay back and chip away at other people. Yeah, Gold Dwarfs are so good at any class that just wants you to sit there and tank. Okay, when it comes to the Ranger, there is generally one class that's considered the best for this, and it is, of course, the Elf, and more importantly, the Wood Elf. Just from the scale of proficiency, but also from the fact that if you go over to proficiencies, you have a bunch of every kind of weapon you can think of. Yeah, Wood Elves are like the key Dungeons and Dragons Ranger type. And this is so good for Gloomstalkers. Anyone that hasn't seen my actual playthrough, I was a assassin Gloomstalker. I was a human, which we'll touch on humans in a bit. But yeah, this just adds to the Wood Elf ability, and they're so good. So good. Another good fit here would be a Deep Gnome. Because Deep Gnomes, if I can get over to my tab, Deep Gnomes are really good for stone camouflage, so you have advantage on stealth checks, and superior dark vision. You can see in the dark up to 24 meters. Again, really good for a Gloomstalker, really good for a hunter. Beastmaster, it can kind of come in handy. Not many people play Beastmaster, I don't think. I haven't played it in this game, I'm going to, because I want to do a video on it. But at like tabletop level, it's generally considered like the worst of the Ranger subclasses. But this could be a way around it. Forest Gnome is also very good. Speak of animals, is a Ranger ability that is so good, as well as Dark Vision. Anything that really allows you to not lose sight of your targets while you pick them off from afar is amazing. Now, to the Rogue. This is my favourite class in D&D, and in most RPGs, to be honest. I love stealthy, like dual-wielding, skirmisher-esque characters. I think they're great. Demon is, again, great for this. Spirit Dark Vision is amazing for a Rogue, especially to allow you to do things like sneak attack and things like that. If you are in a darkness pool, due to something like, I don't know, the Hunger of Adar or something, having a Rogue with Superior Dark Vision that they can still see the enemies within is amazing. Stone Camouflage is, of course, very good advantage on stealth checks. And the more you buff up your stealth throughout the game, because you will, you can really just not fail a stealth check, or come really hard to failing it. And this is not only good for in-battle, it's really good for outside of combat as well, because Baldur's Gate 3 does have a lot of situations where you will want to sneak around. Deep Gnome can really help you out here. Again, Forest Gnome, very good for this Dark Vision, and Rock Gnome, Gnomes in general, very good for being rogues. Halflings, again, they can have less on the board for you in terms of they're not going to have some of the benefits other races will, but they are very versatile, and again, naturally stealthy, have advantage on stealth checks. Strong, hard, resistant, have advantage on saving throws against poison and resistance. This can be very, very good. Yeah, gnomes are so good. They also have things such as lucky. When you roll a 1 from attack roll, ability check or saving throw, you can re-roll the die and must use a new roll. So if you're doing a sneak attack and you somehow roll a low attack, you can use your lucky and you'll get it done. And brave as well, you have advantage on saving throws against being frightened. This can be very good for a rogue as well, because genuinely, if you have a rogue in your party, they will be your highest DPS character, just because of things like sneak attack and stuff like that. So again, brave can be very good to make sure you aren't losing out on those rounds of having some sneak attack going. And of course, we're back to the elf. In this case, the high elf. Number 1, a cantrip, being able to use Firebolt is great, but also all the proficiencies we saw earlier of all the weapons you could use. Rapiers, hand crossbows, short bows, long bows, that sort of stuff really can help you spice up your rogue class from the start and really open up your options in the long term as you progress through the game. Sorcerer is one of 2 magic, or pure magic we shall call them, classes. Sorcerer relies on more innate magic as opposed to the wizard, which is more learned. And again, for this, the elf is an amazing option, primarily the high elf. Again, you get the extra cantrip of Firebolt, so you don't need to worry about picking it or anything like that. They have a bunch of proficiencies, which you get here. Fey Ancestry, so you have an advantage on saving throws against being charmed, and magic can't put you to sleep. Dark Vision is great. Perception proficiencies. The other option here is Drow. Drow are just fantastic magic users in general. Again, Drow weapon training, so a bunch of these. Superior Dark Vision. Have Fey Ancestry. We have the Perception proficiency. Dancing Lights as a cantrip. Now, this might not be a cantrip you'd usually pick because you want more offensive ones. So having this on your options is very, very helpful. And of course, the best of both worlds, the Half Drow. This is literally the best of both worlds. Dancing Lights cantrip. But you also have all the benefits of the Half Elf. So weapon efficiency and arm efficiencies, which you probably won't need to worry about. But you will have Dark Vision. You have your Fey Ancestry. All those lovely buffs there. The charismatic Warlocks. I know people that love Warlocks. I wasn't a big fan of them, to be honest, until I played this game. But they are very, very good. Will was phenomenal in my first playthrough. Eldritch Blast is also amazing. It's one of the best spells ever in D&D. And for this, there are 2 options that really work with the Warlock. It is the Tiefling and the Drow. Now, they're both just very good magic users in this game due to racial abilities and whatnot. They also have a bunch of benefits, such as the Tiefling has an innate Hellish Rebuke, which I think is phenomenal, and Dark Vision. And the Drow has a bunch of things such as your Drow weapon training, as well as superior Dark Vision and your Fey Ancestry. This really makes these 2 classes what I think the most optimal when it comes to choosing a Warlock build. And if you pump your Charisma into these, obviously, your Warlock is going to be amazing. I also know people that swear by using the Halfling, and more importantly, the Lightfoot Halfling, when it comes to making a great old one Warlock, because of the lucky ability, where you get to reroll a 1 for attack ability or saving throws. This is because the Great Old One is based around critical hits and that sort of stuff, and they swear by using the Halfling for that ability. I haven't used this myself, but I know multiple people that have, and that's why I've thrown it in here. Maybe it's something you want to experiment with. And last but not least, it's our other pure spellcaster, we will call them, much like the Sorcerer. This is the Wizard. Now the Wizard, unlike the Sorcerer, does not rely on innate abilities, but more the learning of abilities. Okay, for Wizards, again, Drows and Elves are really the top tier like spellcasters in D&D and Baldur's Gate 3. So you can't really go wrong with these, much like with a Sorcerer and whatnot. However, Githyanki. Now this might seem like a weird choice, and it is a weird choice. However, I think Githyanki are phenomenal wizards, because the wizard itself has no armor. It relies on using robes. And so the Githyanki is really good at having the defensive capabilities. And much like how you'd play a fighter Githyanki or a monk Githyanki, the ability to get out of a situation quickly and effectively through the use of jumping extra or Misty Step. Now granted, these are abilities you could choose yourself in the game or learn through the use of scrolls, but if these abilities are innate to you, then it frees up your spell slots and your spell memorize spells that you could pick. Therefore, I really do believe that the Githyanki make phenomenal wizards in the long run. Now, I spoke about it earlier, but humans. Now, you might have noticed that we didn't pick a single human for any of the classes. In my opinion, humans are designed to be a perfect blank slate. They don't have that many sort of magical abilities or anything like that because they are human-based. They also don't have a full range of proficiencies with weapons, but I think across the board humans are more of a blank slate that are really you can drop them into anywhere and they will work with that class. That being said, as I said at the start of the video, there isn't really a optimal design for when you pick a class or what race you should pick. In my opinion, the whole point of D&D is that everything works together. And as I said, some classes are fit like a puzzle. They fit nicer with certain races, as we've seen in this video, but it's not important, it's not key. So sure, take one of these optimal classes and see what you think, but if you really want to be a half-elf or drow half-elf barbarian, go for it. Have fun, it will still work. You'll still have a lot of fun with this, it will still work perfectly. You cannot go wrong, I promise you. Let me know what you thought about this video below. Let me know if there's anything you disagree with or what you agree with. If you haven't already, please drop the video a like, helps me amazingly. If you're new and you're not subscribed, you'd like to, that'd also be amazing. Hopefully, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.